4-grade achievement gap. In an economy where higher skills are ever more necessary, that is scandalous. In a nation dedicated to equal opportunity, that's scandalous. Among the political errors of King and Johnson and Dirksen and Humphrey, this should be a national scandal, demanding action.
The story of America is a story of progress. And that's true because of men like President Lyndon Baines Johnson. This man, born into poverty, weaned in a world full of racial hatred, somehow found within himself the ability to connect his experience with the brown child in a small Texas town, the white child in Appalachia, the black child in Watts. As powerful as he became in that Oval Office, he understood them. He understood what it meant to be on the outside. And he believed that their plight was his plight too. That his freedom ultimately was wrapped up in theirs. And that making their lives better was what the hell the presidency was for.
And to talk about all of it, we have assembled our own little summit on civil rights. We're joined by Nikole Hannah-Jones of ProPublica and The Atlantic, Georgetown University's Michael Eric Dyson, plus Evan Wolfson of Freedom to Marry, and out in Los Angeles, PBS's Tavis Smiley. Nikole, I want to talk to you first because you've done some recent research on this. Do you think George Bush is right? Is this a national scandal that we face here, that the reading scores amongst black African Americans is still so much worse than it is among whites? And what is to be done about that?
Well, I've spent the last year focusing on resegregation and really what integration did for our country. And what it did in terms of education and black students was it greatly narrowed the achievement
So
gap.
are you saying we are resegregating our schools? Is that what you've done?
Absolutely. I mean, you can look at the demographic data. I've particularly focused on the South, which has become the most integrated region of the country because of federal action and court orders. And you are seeing that once districts are released from their court orders, they do start to take actions that resegregate. And as that resegregation has happened, the achievement gap has widened.
Mm-hmm. Michael, what's your take on this summit that we just had here and what Nikole has just said?
Well, the summit is extraordinary to talk about Lyndon Baines Johnson 50 years afterward. Here, John F. Kennedy gained in death what he didn't necessarily earn in life, a burnished reputation for the achievement of civil rights. But the so-called redneck president from Texas did more for black people, I would argue, than any president since Abraham Lincoln. He joined the figure I, in 2000, called the greatest American to ever live, Martin Luther King Jr., in a kind of fellowship of common ideals, along with many others. But the civil rights leader and the president joined together to forge connections that were both prophetic and also politically savvy to forge difference and democracy in this nation. The tragedy is we have come down from that mountain. The Supreme Court has said that the very means by which we have achieved justice in terms of voting rights is a significant symbol that we no longer need it. That kind of logic is askew, so what we need to do is to recuperate and regenerate the same kind of prophetic passion that LBJ and MLK had together.
Tavis Smiley, what's your take on where we are today on equality?
I think it's fair, Bob, to say that it's a mixed bag. There are some Americans who are gaining ground. There are other Americans who are losing ground. It's as if the American House is putting out the welcome mat for some groups, but still posting no trespassing signs on the lawn for other groups. I think in our nation, back to what President Carter said on tape a few moments ago, that there is a sort of fundamental fairness fatigue that has afflicted too many of our fellow citizens. As Dr. Dyson was just intimating, for Dr. King and others in the movement, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, were the starting line. It was not the finish line. So that 50 years later, we need to have a conversation, Bob, not just about civil rights, C-I-V-I-L, but about civil rights, S-I-L-V-E-R. That is to say, economic rights, economic freedom. Black folk lag behind in every leading economic category 50 years later, even in the Obama era. And the bottom line is this: if you don't have economic freedom, you really ain't free. So that poverty then becomes a sort of new slavery. So the time has come for us to have a conversation again, not just about civil rights and celebrating that 50 years later, but how do we get on, Bob, talking about economic rights for all Americans?
All right. Evan Wolfson, we'll come to you in part 2 of this conversation, which we're going to continue about gay rights and where does that fit into all of that. Up next, some personal thoughts about another anniversary.
Across America, people are taking charge of their type 2 diabetes with non-insulin Victoza.
For a while, I took a pill to lower my blood sugar, but it didn't get me to my goal. So I asked my doctor about Victoza, and he said Victoza works differently than pills, and it comes in a pen. Victoza is proven to lower blood sugar and A1C. It's taken once a day, anytime, and the needle's thin. Victoza is not for weight loss, but it may help you lose some weight.
Victoza is an injectable prescription medicine that may improve blood sugar in adults with type 2 diabetes when used with diet and exercise. It is not recommended as the first medication to treat diabetes and should not be used in people with type 1 diabetes or diabetic ketoacidosis. Victoza has not been studied with mealtime insulin. Victoza is not insulin. Do not take Victoza if you have a personal or family history of medullary thyroid cancer, multiple endocrine neoplasia syndrome type 2, or if you are allergic to Victoza or any of its ingredients. Symptoms of a serious allergic reaction may include swelling of face, lips, tongue, or throat, fainting or dizziness, very rapid heartbeat, problems breathing or swallowing, severe rash or itching. Tell your doctor if you get a lump or swelling in your neck. Serious side effects may happen in people who take Victoza, including inflammation of the pancreas, pancreatitis, which may be fatal. Stop taking Victoza and call your doctor right away if you have signs of pancreatitis, such as severe pain that will not go away in your abdomen, or from your abdomen to your back, with or without vomiting. Tell your doctor about all the medicines you take and if you have any medical conditions. Taking Victoza with a sulfonylurea or insulin may cause low blood sugar. The most common side effects are nausea, diarrhea, and headache. Some side effects can lead to dehydration, which may cause kidney problems.
If your pill isn't giving you the control you need, ask your doctor about non-insulin Victoza. It's covered by most health plans.
I had a chance to be at the Civil Rights Summit in Texas last week, and it was a breathtaking monument to courage. One of those times you remember why you are proud to be an American. But when I realized Tuesday is the anniversary of the Boston bombing, it reminded me that on our worst days, we also see America at its finest. We can never forget the heinous crime, but more important to remember are the great acts of heroism that day. These are scenes that need no words, pictures that need no caption. It is sometimes lost in today's selfish political discourse, but these pictures show us that the courage we have seen so often in the struggle for human rights and throughout our history is still a part of us. What makes us the country we have always been. And if we choose, the country we will always be. We'll be back in a minute.
The right advisor can help take the middle market to the global market. McGladrey, Assurance Tax Consulting. Experience the power of being understood.
When folks in the lower 48 think about what they get from Alaska, they think salmon and energy. But the energy BP produces up here creates something else as well. Jobs all over America. Thousands of people here in Alaska are working to safely produce more energy. But that's just the start. To produce more from existing wells, we need advanced technology. That means high-tech jobs in California and Colorado. The oil moves through one of the world's largest pipelines. Maintaining it means manufacturing jobs in the Midwest. Then we transport it with 4 state-of-the-art double-hull tankers, some of the safest, most advanced ships in the world, built in San Diego with $1 billion investment. Across the United States, BP supports more than 250,000 jobs. And no energy company invests more in the U.S. than BP. When we set up operation in one part of the country, people in other parts go to work. That's not a coincidence. It's one more part of our commitment to America.
Well, some of our stations are leaving us now, but for most of you, we'll be right back with a lot more Face the Nation, including more of our civil rights panel and our political analysts, plus one of Washington's greatest happenings. So stay with us.
What is it about Pope Francis that's captured the world's attention? Some of his closest friends will tell you. Only on 60 Minutes, tonight.
The Mentalist, tonight after The Good Wife, only CBS.
You might already have the reliability of Verizon's 4G LTE network. Or maybe you're already enjoying the speed and HD picture quality of 100% fiber optic Verizon Fios. Or you just haven't switched to either yet. Well, no matter what you've got, now's your last chance to get savings back in your pocket. Just combine a Verizon wireless smartphone and a Fios Quantum Triple Play before April 19th and save $20 a month for 2 years. That's $480 in savings, in addition to other special offers you could qualify for. Plus, there are no annual contracts required. So whether you've got Verizon Wireless, Fios, or neither, you can get a deal. Just add whatever service you're missing and earn big-time savings only Verizon can give you. Hurry, this offer ends soon. So double up and save today. Call 1-877-GET-IT-ALL to sign up. That's 1-877-GET-IT-ALL. Getting the best networks for less. That's powerful.
Hurry into Sleepy's for our Friends and Family Mattress event with Simmons Queen mattress sets starting at just $2.99. Only at Sleepy's, the mattress professionals.
Hurt in a wreck?
Call 1-800-WIN-WIN-1 right now.
Welcome back to Face the Nation and our civil rights discussion. We're here with Nikole Hannah-Jones of ProPublica and The Atlantic, Michael Eric Dyson of Georgetown. His latest book is I May Not Get There With You, The True Martin Luther King Jr., and Evan Wolfson of Freedom to Marry, plus PBS's Tavis Smiley. He's in L.A. this morning. His upcoming book is Death of a King, the real story of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s final year. Let me just start with you, Evan. So now it's gay rights. Is that the next chapter of the civil rights struggle that's been going on for so long?
Well, I wouldn't call it the next chapter. I think it's part of the same struggle. I think what the struggle, as President Obama said, that the civil rights movement did so much to lay the foundation for, and President Johnson's work, and Dr. King's work, and all the millions of unsung heroes, was to create an America that's a more perfect union for everybody. And gay people are part of that everybody, but as we've just all heard and said, we're not done with any of these fights on any of these fronts that overlap anyway. And, you know, my blood boils when I see voter suppression, the assault on women's access to contraception, that we're just debating that. So it's not a matter of this or that or that. Civil rights is about the America we want for everybody, where everybody can participate and contribute.
George Bush was talking about closing the achievement gap. Nikole, what does that mean to you?
I just find it interesting that we have so much discussion about closing the gap without discussing that one thing that has been proven through history to close the gap, which is integrating Black and high-poverty students into middle-class white schools. And the reason that works is we know separate has never been equal in the history of this country. It's no more equal today than it was 50, 60 years ago.
That's right.
The resources follow white and middle-class students.
That's
and when you separate Black and Latino and poor students from those resources, you get an achievement gap. It's not rocket science, I guess.
Absolutely. And I think that those punishing disparities have to be acknowledged. If you've got a $90 to $100 million school out in the suburbs and you've got zoological experiments and, you know, high-speed internet access, you're going to have one outcome. If you've got, schools where there is barely any running water, you're going to have another outcome. And also, the devotion of resources is not just material, but it's also emotional, it's also financial, to be sure, but it's also a kind of intellectual expression of empathy for those students. And I think unless we address what Tavis Smiley talked about, which is the extraordinary poverty, you've got a 14% black unemployment rate, you've got extraordinary escalating rates of poverty for those who are concentrated in urban arenas, and on top of that, you've got tensions between other groups who are, so to speak, fighting for those limited resources. I was glad to hear you talk about the fact that we're in it together. I have challenged African-American people to deal with the homophobia that prevents an understanding and empathy with other groups, and I'm glad to hear you talk about as well. We got to challenge, as Robert Raven did among LGBT people, to talk about how the fact is we got to devote those resources, especially the kind of legitimacy that white male gay folk have, to issues of civil rights as well. It's a both and not an either or.
Let me go back to Tavis. Do you think, in general, Tavis, that President Obama has done enough for African Americans?
No. I think the short answer is, Bob, that I can get to Washington from Los Angeles a lot faster than I can get from Washington back to Los Angeles, because coming to D.C., I've got a tailwind pushing me. Coming back from D.C. to L.A., I've got a headwind obstructing me. President Obama clearly has had a headwind for most of his presidency, and yet his racial agenda has been almost non-existent. He has not respectfully done as much as he could have done, even with the obstruction. As I intimated earlier, African Americans, even in the Obama era, lag behind in every single leading economic indicator category. So I think the lesson of LBJ is that you've got to be willing to take a risk. You've got to be willing to make this issue a priority. And since I'm talking about presidents, at the risk of being politically incorrect, I was happy to hear former President George W. Bush say what he said, but that statement about the soft bigotry of low expectations vis-a-vis the education gap cannot be disconnected from his policies. And that's, again, the message of LBJ 50 years later, Bob, that we have to have corrective policies that help level the playing field.
That's
Dr.
right.
King, even after the passage of the Civil Rights Act and after the passage of the Voting Rights Act, was not satisfied. As Dr. Dyson knows, he talked about after all his work at the end of his life, Bob, that he fretted that we had integrated into a burning house. He challenged us all to become firemen. So that was the beginning. It was not the end, and presidents have to push policies that help disadvantaged people come up.
That's
well,
right.
Now, George Bush did put No Child Left Behind into effect. That was a bipartisan bill. It had support from Senator Kennedy, from George Miller in the House, one of the most liberal of the Democrats in the House. Do you feel that was a success, or it's now, the Congress can't find a way to refund or fund those programs now? What do you think the impact of that was?
It's a good question. The reason why there's still conversation to this day, still infighting about No Child Left Behind, is because it was so imperfect in so many ways. It may have been well-intentioned going in, but the way it got implemented, and so the debate continues today about whether or not this program was successful or not. I think, quite frankly, it did not measure up, never mind the intention.
Right.
The bottom line is that, education has got to be a major priority, but you can't side always, as the Bush administration did, if not always, certainly too many times. You can't side, Bob, with the rich and the lucky. You can't side with the powerful over the privileged and somehow think that magically the field is going to get leveled. Dr. King, once again, put it this way, that that progress does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability. We have to be intentional about this, and if we're not intentional vis-a-vis our public policy debates, then these people are never, these groups that are disenfranchised are never going to catch up.
Nicole, let me go to you. You have a fascinating article coming out in the Atlantic this week about what you talked about earlier, about what you feel and what you found to be the resegregation of some schools. What do you think is the most important thing that, let's just say, the administration, the Congress could do right now?
That's an interesting question. To me, one of the fundamental flaws with No Child Left Behind that we don't talk about is it still is attempting to make separate schools equal. It's still saying that, yes, these schools are all black, all Latino, and poor, but we're just, if we just put enough resources in, we can turn those schools around. There's almost no money devoted to programs that would help schools integrate, that would help schools break up the poverty that leads to the achievement gap. And so until there's a real conversation about that, because I think there is a fundamental misunderstanding of Brown. Brown v. Board of Education was not about resources. By the time Brown came before the Supreme Court, Southern states who believed that a ruling was going to come in their against their interests had begun to equalize funding, all of those types of tangibles. Brown was about the separation in itself, and that in a nation with a history of a racial caste, to separate black students from the mainstream was inherently unequal. And we still don't want to talk about that separation.
And I would just say part of the reason we've seen this shift on gay people and support for the freedom to marry is because gay people have been able to come out of the closet. Non-gay people who support gay people, who are part of the family of gay people, have spoken up and told their stories, and it's bridging those gaps, showing the common connection that has enabled America to now come to majority support for the freedom to marry in a relatively short period of time, because that conversation and that reducing the separation and isolation has had that effect. And, you know, one of the real inspirations for me out of this summit was, in addition to the challenge to keep going, was that people can do it. You know, it's easy to get very despondent and frustrated and fearful for the future of the country, and yet we also have these examples from our history that we can come together and we can do better.
What do you see on the horizon? Are there any court cases we ought to be looking for? What's the situation?
Well, just this week we began a wave of cases that have now reached the federal appellate courts in which couples who've been denied the freedom to marry have challenged it. We won 10 out of 10 lower court federal rulings over the last few months. We just began arguments in the 10th Circuit, and there will be several others still to come as we make our way, hopefully, to the Supreme Court to bring the country to national resolution.
And you know what's interesting, too, talking about the
Never
shifting
happened.
of a paradigm, but also the shifting of an atmosphere. LBJ had a booming economy, number one, so that the Great Society was funded by an optimism in the economy that simply is not present now. And number two, he had the privileges of white male to go to some of these senators and then really, not only the privileges of white male, but also his experience as a legislator to go in there and say, look, I'm going to collar you and you better do the right thing. The obstructionism that Mr. Smiley referred to in regard to President Obama has been so complete that it has discouraged even the inclination to do the right thing. The sharp criticism is necessary and right, but we got to talk about the broader atmosphere as well.
It could not have been worse than the Southern Democrats who tried to block.
No doubt about it. But what I'm suggesting you is that, but when they did the poll about the inclination of the American public to support it, that was much higher than expected. Number one. But number two, I'm not saying the resistance wasn't there, but I'm saying that Barack Obama faces, in this case, some resistance that LBJ didn't. LBJ knew explicitly that white supremacy was the predicate for the resistance. We can't even mention that now, that some of the resistance that Barack Obama is facing now is racially based.
That's right.
And the racial basis of the resistance, for those who call it out, are seen as somehow playing the race card. That's not to deny at all or nullify what Tavis Smiley said in terms of challenging this to step up to the plate and articulate a vision that is both holistic and comprehensive, that is transformative of African-American people in the same way that LBJ did. But it would be also ignoring the historical and political context to deny the resistance that Barack Obama faces in a way that we can't even publicly articulate and examine as a matter of consensus.
All right. And of course, it's not all on the president. We have to do the work.
We have to do some stuff as well.
That's a very good way to end this. Thank you all very much for a fascinating discussion. We'll be back with our political panel in just a minute.